Now, I wanted to take you into a practice in Tennessee. This is a practice in which there's a 16-month-old dog being presented for a progressive motor disorder. It's been going on for about 5-7 days. And they're having this kind of powwow on a video consult. We're in the, I think it's the exam room of the practice. You can see the owner seated there, along with the owner's daughter in the princess dress. And we're going through differential diagnoses. And somewhere during the call, somebody said, "Hey, has that dog ever been vaccinated for rabies?" And there was a pause in the conversation. You can almost hear the pause. And they had assumed the dog's 16 months old. Of course it's been vaccinated. Turns out it's never had a rabies vaccine. This dog went into the hospital. 2 days later, the dog's dead. The dog was tested, was the first case of skunk variant rabies in the state of Tennessee in 2016. It was one of the first of 6 cases. Now, I want to run this for you again. More to this than just showing you what a rabid dog looks like. In this case, once rabies is confirmed, turn that volume off. Once rabies is confirmed, public health is in charge. Public health determines who's been exposed, not you. And as a result of that, the owner, obviously, and his daughter, and any family members at home have been exposed. The 2 veterinarians and 3 vet techs were exposed to rabies. That cost the practice $20,000 per person for post-exposure prophylaxis. Now, I do some work for the AVMA's Liability Insurance Trust on vaccine injury. And as a result of that, I know they're concerned about the client who was in the waiting room with their cat when the rabid dog came through and public health says exposure. So there's a phone call you don't want to make. So you can see how that can get rather complicated over time. Now, here's a list of, I don't want you to write this down, okay? Just look at it. This is a list of the antigens that the USDA has licensed as vaccines, for vaccines. And there's about 30 or so antigens, 28, 30 antigens, but there's 120 vaccines, and more are coming. So the market is huge. Of all those antigens, only 2 are required by law. I know they sell a 1-year and a 3-year distemper parvoadeno vaccine. That is a marketing deal. This is not. There's a 1-year and a 3-year rabies. That is the law. All right? You tell me, and we've got an opportunity here for me to question you. What have you been told is the difference between a 1-year and a 3-year rabies vaccine?
Testing for the vaccine testing.
Testing?
Testing the vaccine is the durability.
Right. But as far as you're concerned, what is the difference in them? Yeah, I hear that all the time. The label. Nothing. Now that's not exactly true. There is a difference, but that doesn't matter to you. You are obligated under law to practice according to the label on the vaccine. So it's either a 1-year or a 3-year. Now, please bear that in mind. With regard to the cat, there are 4 vaccines. All of the licensed vaccines for the dog, killed adjuvanted vaccines, are also licensed for the cat. And then in addition, there is the non-adjuvanted rabies vaccine. That's the PureVax product. It's been around for several years. There's a 1-year and a 3-year product. And I wanted to mention to you that the 3-year recombinant feline rabies vaccine is substantively different than the 1-year. And it has a different price on it. It's more expensive because it is truly a different product. As a result of that, most veterinarians that I interact with don't want to put adjuvants into cats, number one. This is the only game in town. So they will use the 1-year rabies vaccine, recombinant, non-adjuvanted, annually. and bring the cat in yearly. And the reason is largely the price difference and the stick shot. But I do have clients that request the 3-year. But that's your call and the client's call. But a lot of veterinarians that I talk to that don't want to put adjuvant into cats, and you know where I'm going with that adjuvant story, is the concern over chronic inflammation and in some cats, the risk of fibrosarcoma. So avoiding that is an option for you by using non-adjuvanted vaccines. Now, you'll notice also that the half ml vaccine is coming into fruition. We're seeing more and more products introduced for the cat that are half ml. And I wanted to emphasize to all of you, these are low volume. This is not low dose. The companies are moving that way, and I happened to call Behringer and ask him, why did you do that? And the response was, well, so many of the veterinarians in the country are following the injection site recommendations put forward, rabies right, leukemia left. You're putting vaccines into peripheral limbs. And this is really just done to support or augment your administering vaccines in these locations. Don't do it in the tail, but the bottom line is this is for you. And you're seeing this in the pipeline of new vaccines for the cats. Now, I wanted to start asking you all a few questions regarding rabies. Remember I said at the beginning of this presentation, you all are the experts by default. So I want to make sure you're the experts, okay? Now, in this, I would ask you, and this is an independent question because there's a lot of variation around the country, which of these species in the state in which you practice are required by law to get a rabies vaccine? Dog, cat, ferret? So this varies, so there's no single answer because it's dramatically different from state to state. How many of you, I wanted to ask, have a state that requires rabies vaccination for horses? Good answer. Nobody raised their hand because there is no state that has a rabies requirement for horses because horses don't represent a public health threat like a dog and a cat. And anybody who kisses their ferret should have that ferret vaccinated for rabies, just my opinion on that. So even though a state may not require it, it's still important to recommend it. Now look at this, you may not be aware of this, but only 39 states require dogs be vaccinated for rabies. Only 34 states require cats be vaccinated for rabies. 20 states require ferrets. And a lot of veterinarians don't know, even though they practice in that state, what the requirement is on the species. And 11 states have no vaccination requirement for rabies whatsoever. Mostly Western states. However, in these states, they will have local jurisdictions that mandate rabies. That means a city or a county. Now this gets really interesting. Take Kansas just as an example, and there are several states like this. Kansas doesn't have a state level rabies requirement for the dog or the cat or the ferret. But they do have individual cities and counties that have laws, and sometimes the city laws are different than the county that the city is in. So the client lives in the county, the veterinarian's outside the county, whose laws apply? So you see the importance of really recommending, even if you're practicing in a state that doesn't have a state requirement, we want to encourage people to get their dog and their cat vaccinated against rabies. Now, just to give you a couple of examples, I find this interesting. Look at Pennsylvania and New Jersey. If you didn't know this, you're going to leave here knowing that Pennsylvania, especially southeastern Pennsylvania, around Philadelphia, has the highest concentration of cat rabies in the United States and has for several years. You don't want to go to Philadelphia without a rabies shot. Just telling you, all right? Now, the state of New Jersey, right next to Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania does have a law recently enacted for cats and dogs to be vaccinated against rabies. But you go next door to New Jersey, which has about the 4th highest incidence of cat rabies in the United States, and they don't have a law for cats, only for dogs. So I called the public health people there and I said, why don't you have a law for cats? The answer was interesting. Oh, it's political. Really? That's public health, you know? So even though there is no state law for cats in New Jersey, you should vaccinate. We hope you're recommending it anyway. Now go to the other side of Pennsylvania. To the left of Pennsylvania is Ohio. Ohio is the only state east of the Mississippi River that doesn't have a state level rabies requirement for dogs or cats. So do you see the variation in that? And our objective is to ensure that veterinarians always recommend vaccination. Given the international increased pressure on rabies, this is something that we, I think, have a real responsibility to comply with. Now, these rabies laws are interesting, and I have had an opportunity to do a deep dive in the state rabies laws. And I found some, and this is an example. The state of South Carolina has a statute on the books that is in effect today, and it says, if your dog is found worrying my sheep, I can shoot your dog. And I'm not subject to civil or criminal action. So I wonder, what does it look like when a dog is worrying sheep? How do I know whether or not I can shoot the dog? So I started looking for evidence, and this is the only thing I could find. I'm not sure there is a law that says you can shoot the sheep for worrying the dog. That's kind of what I'm seeing in this picture. So you see the laws that are on the books, some of them go back a long time. And these are interesting laws when it comes to that. Now let's look at some of the rabies laws as they apply to either the entire United States or to most of the states. Look at the core vaccines for the young dog. Rabies is required in the majority of states. We hope you're all doing that. And you have the choice of a 1-year or a 3-year vaccine in most, but not all states. So you're going to give that at a single dose at 12 weeks of age, right? And it's good for how long? Yeah, 1 year. We all know it's good for a year at that point. So it's and it doesn't matter whether you're using the 1 year or the 3-year labeled rabies vaccine. It's only good for 1 year. Now, what's interesting in the milieu of state laws is that there are 3 states that don't recognize the 1-year rabies vaccine. And so California, West Virginia, and Mississippi do not allow the sale of a 1-year rabies vaccine, 1-year labeled rabies vaccine. Only use the 3-year. And so the companies that make these can't sell in those states. California, this only applies to dogs. They don't care about the cat. You can vaccinate the cat with anything you want, but not dogs. So West Virginia, Mississippi, dog and cat, they don't even allow sale of the vaccine in the state. And it must be vaccinated by. So there's an earlier vaccine. The earliest you can give a vaccine for rabies in the United States is 12 weeks. Before that, it works really well, but not in law. Remember, there is rabies law over here, and there's rabies immunology over here. And you are obligated to practice according to the law, okay? So that's what makes rabies a little bit unique. So you must be vaccinated by a certain age. Now this is a requirement for the client, the dog or cat owner. In this case, you've got to vaccinate them in most states by 16 weeks. But some states it's 5 months. Other states it's 6 months. Some states, they have 1 day to get them vaccinated. The earliest you can give it is 12 weeks, and they must be vaccinated by 12 weeks. You know that doesn't happen. But that's just the way the laws have been written, and they're still on the books. So just be aware of that. Now, I wanted to highlight something to you. I want to go back into Immunology 101. I think the point that I'm going to make here is important for everybody in here who's giving rabies vaccines. If you are using a killed vaccine, inactivated virus or bacteria, you've got to give 2 doses of that initially. And I'm using lepto as the example here. If you give a lepto vaccine and you give the first one as a single dose, you get a transient rise of antibody that lasts about a few weeks. And then it goes away. And it's critical in basic, again, immunology 101 to give 2 doses. And the antibody response curve looks like this. So you see that it's that second dose that really turns the immunological machinery on and creates what we call a duration of immunity. The first dose won't do that. Now, the first dose is called the priming dose. So you're putting the machinery in place, and the second dose, the immunizing dose, turns it on. So that's critical. The thing for the veterinarian to know is what is the distance between those 2 red arrows in terms of time? And the bottom line is that you've got to give those vaccines not earlier than 2 weeks, good, and not longer than
4.
we say give them 3 to 4 weeks, but I want you to know that we'll go out to 6 weeks. I want you to tell the client 3 to 4 weeks, but no, if they don't come back for 5 or 6, you can still boost, you can still immunize the patient. If they don't come back for 2 months, you've lost the priming effect and you may have to restart, okay? Should be an incentive to come back and get that. Now, in dog, cat, horse, and human immunology, we're all the same mammals. It's about 2 weeks after the second dose that you are considered to be fully vaccinated. Same with COVID. That's standard kind of terminology. But what do we do with rabies?